Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Reading with Raptors. Today I am coming to you live from the floor of our program room, where it will be me and one of our resident bald eagles that we call Gladdy. So we're going to be taking a look here. Today we're going to be talking about beaks specifically, and I figured what better example of a good raptor beak than one of the larger raptors that we have here in our collection of education birds. So we'll give everyone a few more minutes to get in and then we'll get started. Today we're going to be reading a book with some wonderful artwork that I love very much called Beaks by Sneed B III, with art by Robin Brickman. So I'm really excited to get started on that. We'll give everyone a few minutes here. A little bit about our setup that we have going on here today. So he has two perches to choose from, and then I also have this big pan for water. So hopefully we'll see if he's interested in taking a bath. We're finally getting to the point where it's hopefully getting warm enough at night that all the birds can just have water full time out in their outdoor enclosures. But for now, it's a little bit touch and go still with the water. Here our Minnesota temperatures are just dipping down below freezing at night. So we're hoping that maybe he'll take a bath. Otherwise, he will maybe get a chance to have some water out in his enclosure now. Looks like we might be above freezing for the next few weeks. Hopefully, that might be it. Might be warm. It might be actually springtime here in Minnesota. So we'll get started here. It looks like a decent number of folks are in. So again, this is one of our resident bald eagles. We call him Gladdy. And we're going to be reading a book called Beaks by Sneed B III, with illustrations by Robin Brickman. These are illustrations that are actually made with cut and folded paper. So I'll try to get some good close-ups because I think that they're wonderful. I have some food here for Gladdy to eat afterwards. So I'll wait till after we're finished with the book to give him that in case anyone's not interested in seeing him eat most of a rat. But we'll take a look at that later. So this is Beaks. Birds have no teeth, no hands, no antlers, horns, or spines, but birds have beaks, and beaks are enough. And this is a picture of a woodpecker finch holding a little branch in his beak. Birds use beaks to get food, but not all beaks work the same. Small beaks peck. These are song sparrows. Sparrows hop along like little kangaroos, pecking at things that look tasty. Their favorite food is dry seeds. When they find a seed, the sparrows use their short, cone-shaped beaks to crack the husk and swallow the seed. Sparrows can move their upper and lower bills from side to side. This helps them handle even tiny seeds without dropping them. I'll show you the whole picture here. See the plants, the little seeds that the song sparrows are looking for. Heavy beaks crush. These are macaws. Like sparrows, many macaws eat seeds. Unlike sparrows, macaws eat very big seeds. With its heavy, sharp beak, the scarlet macaw cuts through the fleshy green fruit of an Indian almond tree. When the macaw reaches the hard nuts, it crushes it and gulps down the nutritious seed inside. With such powerful beaks, macaws are able to dine on seeds that other rainforest birds can only dream about. This is that picture of that macaw. Sorry, there we go. You can see it holding that giant seed in its beak and using it to crush that seed. Powerful beaks. Long beaks probe. This is hummingbirds. Long, thin bills help hummingbirds reach the energy-rich nectar they need to survive. Different bills fit different shapes of flowers. The white-tipped sicklebill hummingbird, The white-tipped sicklebill hummingbird inserts its long, curved bill into the opening of the heliconia flower. With its long, tube-like tongue, the bird drinks up the heliconia's sweet syrup and then zooms away to the next flower. So you can see that very long, curved beak that perfectly fits the shape of those flowers. Hooked beaks tear. This is about eagles. Eagles and other birds of prey are hunters, and their beaks are designed to help them eat flesh. Bald eagles feed mostly on fish. They fly low over a lake or stream and snatch their prey with their long talons. An eagle takes its fish to a perch or nest. Then, the bird uses its sharp, hooked beak to strip away the fish's scaly skin and pick the meat off its bones. So that is that bald eagle using that curved, sharp beak to rip away the scales on that fish. You can see another bald eagle there in the distance, looking for fish over the water. Beaks are made light. This is about toucans. A toucan's large, colorful beak looks heavy, but it is built like a honeycomb and is almost as light as a feather. The toucan uses this long, light tool to pluck berries and insects from tree branches. The beak also allows toucans to identify each other. Unfortunately, a light beak is easily damaged. Toucans sometimes break off pieces of their beaks while hunting or driving away other birds from a favorite fruit tree. Sorry, I'll turn a little bit. There we go. And that is the toucan. See that big, long, broad beak? That's actually so lightweight. Beaks can also be sturdy and strong. This is about woodpeckers. Woodpeckers use their sturdy, pointed beaks to pound, drill, and tear into wood as they search for insects. Some, such as the acorn woodpecker, chip away holes where they store acorns and seeds. Fortunately, a woodpecker's skull is reinforced with extra thick bone. This keeps the bird from getting brain damage while it's woodpecking away. See those holes where they've stored all those acorns? You can see trees covered with them. It's those woodpeckers. Beaks are even made upside down. Flamingos. A flamingo's beak looks ridiculous until you see how the flamingo eats. Flamingos feed with their heads upside down. Standing in shallow lakes and marshes, they draw water through their beaks by using their muscular tongues as pumps. Special strainers in the beak filter out the tiny plants and animals that the flamingo eats. Pigments in these foods give flamingos their bright, dizzying colors. There's a close-up of that beak, sticking it upside down into the water and using it to filter out the food that they're going to eat. You can see a whole group of them there working on that, a bright pink color. I was covering it up with a book, but he just tucked his foot up underneath his feathers, getting very comfortable. A skimming beak. Skimmers. Like the flamingo's beak, a skimmer's beak looks like an accident. The bottom bill is longer than the top. The skimmer puts its backward beak to good use. To hunt, the bird flies with its lower bill slicing below the water surface. When it strikes a fish, the bird snaps its beak shut, trapping the fish in a scissor-like grip. This way, skimmers can catch fish without even getting wet. So these are the skimmers. Look at how long that bottom beak is. It does look like maybe something went wrong, but it's perfect for grabbing on to those fish. You can see what they look like when they're doing that skimming. There's also a swishing beak. This is spoonbills. Spoonbills have flat, paddle-shaped beaks. To find food, spoonbills wade into shallow water and swish their open beaks back and forth. At the same time, the birds use their feet to stir up mud and the animals in it. Like skimmers, they hunt by touch, snapping their beaks closed on insects, fish, and other prey. Hunting in groups probably helps spoonbills stir up more food than hunting alone. So this is that spoonbill beak. You can see where they get their name, right? Big spoon-like bill. There's also a stabbing beak about herons. A heron also wades, but it hunts differently than a spoonbill. A heron walks slowly through the shallows, pausing frequently to study the water. When it sees a fish or other animal, the heron quickly stabs its beak into the water and seizes the prey between its bills. Herons are strong birds and can catch and swallow surprisingly large fish and other animals. This is that heron. Oh, here we go. That heron catching that fish. I love how they used the paper to make these fluffy feathers on its neck. And you can see that very long stabbing bill. A plunging beak. Pelicans. A pelican fishing is one of nature's most thrilling spectacles. When a pelican spots a fish, the bird folds its wings and dives straight down at speeds of up to 40 miles per hour. As the pelican crashes open-mouthed into the water, the pouch on its lower bill puffs out to net its prey. After the water drains from the pouch, the pelican swallows its meal, but only if a sneaky seagull doesn't steal it first. So you can see the pelican swooping down at the top. Sorry, there we go. Swooping down at the top, and then you can see it gulping down that whatever big fish it caught. That's what that beak looks like close up. Very special beaks. There are also prying beaks, like crossbills. A crossbill looks like it would starve to death with its screwball beak. However, the crossed tips of its beak allow the bird to pry apart the scales of pine cones and other cones. This exposes the cone seed, which the crossbill laps up with its sticky tongue. Despite their strange beaks, crossbills also eat fruit, insects, and the seeds of other plants. This is that crossbill. You can see how crooked that beak looks, but it's perfect for prying open those pine cones. Wow. Of course, beaks do more than get food. Beaks can show off, like hornbills. Like toucans, hornbills grow large, brightly colored bills. The bills of many hornbills are topped by a special structure called a casque. Biologists believe that the casque helps hornbills attract mates or identify the age and sex of other hornbills. A hornbill's casque may also amplify the bird's calls and help in knocking down fruit and fighting off enemies. You can see this big casque structure there, that long, sharp beak. Really impressive. Beaks can also help build, like bowerbirds. Many birds build nests, but male bowerbirds also build elaborate courts or bowers, up to 6 feet tall. The birds construct the bowers with sticks and often decorate them with brightly colored objects. The bower's only purpose is to attract females to mate with. Once the male has mated, he takes no part in nest building. The female flies off to build a nest and raise the young all on her own. You can see this elaborate bower decorated with little flowers. So that beak is really important to help move those sticks and grasses and little objects around. Beaks can also help dig, like bee eaters. From their name, it's not hard to guess that bee eaters use their long, thin beaks to catch bees. Once it captures a bee, the bee eater whacks it against a hard surface to knock off the bee's stinger and squeeze out its venom. The bird also uses its bill to dig a home. Bee eaters nest in large colonies, where they dig burrows into dirt cliffs or the ground. These burrows provide shelter and safe places to raise the bee eater's young. So you can see that long, narrow beak, perfect for prying out little bees and great for digging their homes. Beaks can change colors, like western gulls. The beaks of many birds change colors as they grow older. Seagull beaks are good examples. They go through several color combinations during the bird's first 2 or 3 years of life. Afterward, the bills continue to change color between seasons. These changing colors probably help gulls recognize each other. They also give birdwatchers headaches as they try to identify birds, such as this western gull. Here you can see all the different colors that those beaks turn. So you can see the little fluffy baby western gull has a dark beak. Maybe the scruffy juvenile does. And you can see different colors and patterns of black and yellow on that beak. And then we have the yellow beak of the adult, which also has a little red dot on it too. So beaks come in lots of colors, sometimes even in the same bird over time. Sometimes beaks, once a year, get shed, like in puffins. Puffins are handsome birds that dive underwater to catch small fish in northern seas. The puffin's beak can hold up to 24 herring at one time, but it is remarkable for another reason. Each breeding season, male puffins grow special, vividly colored sheaths around their beaks. These sheaths help the males show off and attract females. When mating season ends, the puffins shed their bright decorations until the following year. So you can see a puffin for most of the year over here, and then the very, very big bright beaks that they have during the springtime. Very fancy. Over time, beaks change and change again. All the birds on this page are Hawaiian Honeycreepers. Over time, all life changes. We call this process evolution. Often, one kind of plant or animal evolves into many different forms. Scientists believe that all Hawaiian honeycreepers evolved from a single kind of finch that flew to Hawaii thousands of years ago. Over time, the original finch evolved into more than 40 different forms or species. About half of these species have become extinct, but 20 different kinds of honeycreepers still live in Hawaii. As you can see, their different beaks allow them to survive in many different ways. I'll do a nice close-up on all of these. You can see this nice kind of curved beak, this very curved beak. This one's more long and pointy. This one's very, very long and curved, but then this one's really short and sharp. This one has a really long top beak. So all of these birds are honeycreepers that live in Hawaii, probably eating lots of different things. It's really cool to think about what they'd all be eating and doing with those beaks. All beaks change, including the beaks we see today. Like all other living things, birds and their beaks continue to change as time flies forward. Some of the beaks we see today will survive into the future. Others will disappear or be replaced by new beaks that will allow the birds of tomorrow to survive better. This weeding out and replacement process is called natural selection. It's part of how plants and animals evolve or change over time, and it's what's given us the wonderful, wonderful world and wonderful beaks that we have today. And so these are birds called bitterns. Bitterns. You can see them hiding. I really enjoy these very cottony, fluffy little baby bitterns. You can see those very long, pointy beaks, similar to the herons. I like this page. This one is an activity called Test Your Beakability. By now, you should know what a beak's major purpose is. You should know that a beak's major purpose is to get food. On this page are 6 different birds and their beaks. Just for fun, study each bird and ask yourself, what would I eat with this beak? Would I eat meat, seeds, plants, insects, fruit? We have here a peregrine falcon, curved sharp beak, the long pointy beak of a roadrunner, the very, very long narrow beak of a marbled godwit, the kind of rounded filter beak of a wood duck, very little short pointy beak of a warbler, and the big strong beak of a cardinal. What do you think you'd use those for? If you were one of these birds, what would you use those beaks for? Here's one last page. Here's a hint about what the roadrunner uses its beak for, holding onto a little lizard that it caught. So if you want the answers to those questions, peregrine falcons eat mostly other birds. Roadrunners eat reptiles, birds, insects, and small mammals. Marbled godwits hunt and eat aquatic invertebrates that they find down in the sand, so things like little bugs and crustaceans. Wood ducks eat insects, aquatic plants, fruits, and nuts, especially acorns. Cardinals eat seeds and fruits, and warblers eat mostly insects and occasionally some fruit. Those are all of the birds on this page and what they eat with those beaks. So that was Beaks by Sneed B. Collard III, illustrated by Robin Brickman. Again, those were cut paper that was used to make those illustrations, which I think was really, really beautiful. So those are beaks. Behind me, we have, for those of you joining us, this is one of our bald eagles that lives here full time at the Raptor Center. So we call him Gladdy. He's in his kind of early 20s. I believe he's 23 now this year. And he's lived with us for pretty much his entire life. So giving us an excellent example of what bald eagles actually sound like. A lot of times when we watch TV and movies and even commercials, we'll see some bird soaring overhead, usually an eagle, but sometimes a vulture or a hawk or an osprey or something like that. But you'll see an eagle soaring overhead and you'll hear this really intense screaming sound. And that's not what bald eagles sound like at all. That is what bald eagles sound like, that big kind of call that they make where they throw their head back, like that really kind of very loud, piercing kind of sound. If you want a really good example of the sound you're actually hearing, that red-tailed hawk scream, we actually posted a video last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago now. If you scroll down on the Facebook page, there's a really good video of a red-tailed hawk making that really intense scream. But now you have a great example of what a bald eagle actually sounds like. So someone was asking why this bird lives with us. So you can actually see the way that he's turned. I don't know how well it shows up on the camera because right now he's very fluffy. All of his feathers are fluffed out. But one of his wings doesn't, the elbow joint doesn't work quite the way it's supposed to. So he was found near the side of a road with injuries that usually you can associate with a vehicle collision. So we don't know exactly what happened. If a lot of times for bald eagles, it's they were either too close to the actual road and someone didn't see them, or maybe they tried to take off and flew right in front of a vehicle, or were kind of swooping down to eat some delicious roadkill on the side of the road and didn't see a car coming. Usually something like that, but we don't know exactly what happened to this bird. All we know is that he was found on the side of the road as a first-year bird, so he was all dark feathers, no white head or tail yet. And he had injured his wing, actually near his elbow, so kind of the same as our elbow joint. So that elbow joint, it healed, but it didn't heal quite well enough for him to fully tuck in that wing or fully extend that wing. It's kind of stuck in one spot. So that is why he lives with us, is that wing is just not in the full condition it needs to be for him to be able to fly and hunt on his own out in the wild. Be really hard for him to find and catch food. Bald eagles are definitely great scavengers, so they can usually do pretty well by catching fish and then also scavenging here in Minnesota all year round. But they still need to have that really good flight to be able to survive on their own out in the wild. So keep looking back, he's tucking up his foot again, so he has his one foot kind of tucked up underneath those fluffy feathers that are down by his legs. So he has lots of layers. He has lots of feathers underneath, so he has the nice outer layer of smooth feathers that kind of helps repel water. But then he also has those fluffy feathers underneath that help keep him really nice and warm. So even when it is still below freezing at night, all of our bald eagles here are staying nice and toasty warm. Why do I think he's making that noise? It's a really good question. It can be kind of hard to tell, especially because for raptors, they only have a few noises that they can make. Unlike what we think of as our songbirds, who sometimes have a huge variety of noises that they can make, bald eagles and other raptors usually only have a few different noises that they can make, so they can mean a lot of different things. What I can tell you is, I'm looking at him right now, I don't think he's really stressed out by anything that's happening. He's super fluffed, he has his foot tucked up, all of his feathers on his head are all fluffy. He looks pretty relaxed. So I don't think it has anything to do with being worried or anything like that. It's always a good thing to keep an eye out for. I do have a strange tripod and computers and things set up to watch. So it's a little bit different than his normal kind of time that he would spend in this room, but everything else about his body language is telling me that he seems pretty comfy. Maybe he's wondering about, I have a glove out and some food ready for him. Maybe he's wondering, when's that food coming? But hard to tell. I cannot read his mind, so I have to use what his body language is telling me to figure it out. Why are bald eagles bald? So why do we call them bald eagles? It's a really good question. So earlier when I was talking about why this bird lives with us, I mentioned that he came in as a first-year bird. And I mentioned that he had no white head and white tail. So what happens is that bald eagles, when they are first hatched, they actually come out of their egg about the size of your fist. It's about the size of a goose egg. Sorry, your comments are wonderful. So they come out of an egg about the size of a goose egg, and when they hatch, they're covered in that kind of gray fluffy down. And when they grow to full size, they grow to full size in about 2 to 3 months, so it doesn't take very long. So once they've grown to their full size, they have their first full set of feathers that are all dark brown. So they don't have a white head, they don't have a white tail. In fact, even their eyes and their beaks are dark, dark brown, almost black. So you can really easily tell a first-year bald eagle because they look so different from the adults. Over the next 4 or 5 or even 6 years, they slowly transition into those adult colors. And so their beaks and their eyes turn yellow over time. Their heads and their tails, they slowly lose the brown coloring as it turns white. That way it shows other bald eagles, hello, I am an adult now. I can have my own nest, I can hunt on my own. So it helps to kind of communicate to other bald eagles that they're an adult. So with all of that out of the way, knowing that they don't always have that white head and white tail, why do we call them bald? He's not missing feathers on his head, they're just white. And that all goes back to the change over time that happens to the English language. When people who spoke English were first seeing bald eagles, the word bald meant something very different. It meant white-headed. So you might say that somebody who has white hair was bald. Even though they had hair, it was just white. So when people who spoke English saw this bird, they went, that eagle is bald. It has a white head. So that's why they call it the bald eagle. So even though our use of the word bald has changed to mean missing feathers or missing hair, back then it meant white-headed. So that's why we still call them bald eagles. I really like stories about how things change over time. I think it's so interesting to think about all the things that we still say or do or that animals have that really depend on stuff that happened a really long time ago. I think it's really interesting. You can see him doing some preening in the background. Someone else is talking about checking out the Minnesota DNR's Eagle Cam. There are baby eagles in the nest right now. If you want an idea of what those look like, check out those eagle nest cams. The Minnesota DNR one is fantastic. They have, I believe, 2 chicks in the nest right now. I'm also a big fan of telling people about the Cornell Lab of Ornithology has a lot of different nest cams too. If you're interested in birds other than bald eagles, definitely check those out too. There are a lot of baby birds to watch. And my favorite thing about it is seeing how quickly they grow up. If you look out a bird in a nest one day and then you come back a day or two later, it might have increased in size by a huge amount. Or maybe you look at it and you go, that bird hardly had any feathers 2 days ago and now it's covered in feathers. Birds grow up super fast, so it's always really cool to check in and see how those baby birds are doing. Absolutely. So yeah, go check out the DNR Nest Cam. It's fantastic. A great resource that we have here in Minnesota. Doing some excellent preening still right now. Like I said, I'll give it a little bit and then I'm going to give him maybe a couple more minutes. I'll give him, it's an almost entire rat, and I have a wonderful egg carton to put it in so that he can hopefully rip that up for us. Since we were talking about beaks, I want to give you an idea of how a raptor uses that curved sharp beak. But I also want to wait till a little bit closer to the end just in case we have anybody who wants to hear the questions but maybe doesn't want to see him rip up a rat right away. Maybe you just had breakfast or lunch. I don't want to, I don't want anyone to not enjoy watching him. I wonder if I can adjust the lighting at all. I don't want to mess with the camera too much. The unfortunate part about trying to film bald eagles is because of that beautiful contrast that they have on their bodies, the really dark feathers and the really light head, sometimes it's hard to see all the details of those feathers up close. But right now he's really working hard on trying to preen those neck feathers, so he's having to strain his neck. You can actually really see how long that neck actually is. I feel like birds always look like they don't have much of a neck because they kind of sit like this, but they really have a neck that has twice as many bones in it as ours does. So in the neck portion of our spines, we have 7 bones in our necks. He has twice as many. So he has twice as many bones in his neck, but sometimes hard to tell because of all of those feathers. How big do bald eagles get? Yeah, great question. So I said that they hatch out of an egg, like I said, about the size of your fist if you've got a decently sized hand, about the size of a goose egg, so a little bit larger than a chicken egg. And they're growing to full size in about 2 months. But what does that actually mean? If you had to guess, take a moment by yourselves to think about, if you had to guess how much this bird weighed, what would you guess? Maybe in pounds or similar to something you have around your home. What do you think he might weigh? I will say that for most raptors in the raptor world, generally the females or the girls are larger than the boys. So he's not the largest size of bald eagle that we'd have here in Minnesota. So this bald eagle, if you like grams, he weighs 3,500 grams. But if you like thinking about pounds, like most of us, he weighs about 7.5 pounds. So that's the same as if you go into your refrigerator and you take out a gallon jug of milk or juice or water, that's about how much he weighs. It's a little bit heavier than he is. So he only weighs about 7.5 pounds, right? His wingspan, if he can extend his wings all the way out, a normal male bald eagle here in Minnesota, their wingspan can be about 5.5 feet. The females can get closer to about 6 or a little bit bigger. They usually weigh about up to 10 or 11 pounds here in Minnesota. Most of our largest female bald eagles are about 10 or 11 pounds, maybe a little bit heavier during the winter. The further north you go, so if you go up into Canada and Alaska, their bald eagles are actually bigger because you want to have a bigger body mass to stay warm during those cold winters. So you want to have a bigger body mass to stay nice and warm. On the other hand, if you go down to somewhere like Florida, where they also have a lot of bald eagles, their bald eagles are smaller because it's warmer, so they don't need to stay as large. You don't want to be trying to feed a really large body if you're just going to be too warm. So their bald eagles down south are smaller. Here we have a kind of medium range, and then up far north, they have even larger bald eagles. So ours are about 7-8 pounds for the males, about 10, maybe 11 pounds for the females. So if you're wondering, that makes no sense. How can a bird this big weigh so little? It's all about those hollow bones and those feathers. So he has a couple thousand feathers on his body that make him look really big, even though his actual body and his actual skeleton are quite small. But also underneath all those big fluffy feathers are those bones, and those bones are hollow. Kind of think of like a honeycomb or a sponge, if you take out a sponge. They're kind of built like that. So they have lots of support inside of the bone, but they're still able to be hollow, so really lightweight. Some of his bones actually connect to his respiratory system, or how he breathes. So some of those large bones in his body actually have air in them, which I think is pretty cool. So that way he's able to stay really lightweight. Birds really need to be as lightweight as possible to help get up off of the ground really quickly. You can see sometimes, I'm sure a lot of you have Canada geese roaming around near you. If you look at those Canada geese, they're decently heavy. So if you watch them take off, it takes them a little bit of extra work. Whereas if you look at a bird like, if you have robins or something like that living near you, you can watch them and they can take off really fast. So it really depends. You really want to be really nice and lightweight. All right, I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to feed him this chunk of rat and see if he's interested. So the toy that I have, you can see he's already interested. I have this egg carton. It's great. It's made out of nice recycled cardboard, and it's great for birds to rip up, because then that way, even if he does accidentally eat some of it as he's ripping it apart, it's not toxic. It'll just kind of ball up, and he'll cast it with his pellet, which will be any of the remaining fur from this rat. I won't do a big close-up. I don't want to freak anybody out, but I think we're pretty excited. I'm going to try to hide it so he doesn't see it before I'm ready. I'll show you it when it's in the egg carton. He looks pretty excited though. I think we're ready. So I've got this nice rat in an egg carton. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm glad that other people are excited about the rat too, okay? So I'm gonna put it over here. I'm gonna try to put it in a spot where I think we'll be able to see it. Otherwise I might try to move the camera around a little bit so we can watch. Are you ready? All right, here's a rat in an egg carton. Stay out of the way. I might need to tip it off of the mailbox. We'll see if he needs to figure it out. Oh, there it goes. I'll leave the camera alone while he's like right here. Let him figure out how he wants to get this rat out. So he's using, here, let me adjust this a little bit. Sorry for the shaky camera for a second. There we go. So he's gonna use that curved sharp beak. He's kind of adjusting, oh, perfect example. Just using the pointiness of that curved sharp beak to kind of pierce into, or kind of cut into the cardboard. And then he's going to kind of hold onto it with his feet with those talons. And then he can kind of use the leverage of that beak to kind of rip that, that cardboard into pieces. Let him work on this for a little bit. Maybe I'll see if I can do a little bit closer up. I don't want to accidentally scare him with the tripod, so I don't want to move it around too much. Right now he's working on just the tiniest pieces. Then once he's able to kind of get that rat out, I think he'll be able to do that pretty easily. So this enrichment is something that we do quite a lot with our birds, especially right now where there's really not as much going on for them to look at. We don't have people coming through, they're not going out on programs, things like that. So we've been really trying to make sure that they have lots of different enrichment items. So things like egg cartons, toilet paper tubes, paper towel rolls are all great because they're really non-toxic. But we also have a big collection of things like dog toys and other items that we can put food inside of to kind of, that way he has to really work on it. So sometimes I'll do something like an egg carton with a rat inside of it, wrapped inside of a little lunch bag, and then with some little pieces of rope for him to rip up. So he has to really kind of work at it to be able to get at that rat. And what I think is really interesting about this is that the whole rat is sitting right there, easy to eat, but he's ripping up the egg carton around it instead. So he seems to be preferring to rip up the egg carton rather than eat the rat right away. So it must be pretty entertaining, pretty enriching for him to be able to rip apart that egg carton. Because he's choosing to do it even though he's got the rat right there. Those school shows also get feeding demos. Oh, like when we're doing programs, it'll kind of depend. A lot of times we'll have birds eating on the glove. My personal favorite is I like to feed either an eagle, a nice big chunk of rat. I think it's a great example of a bird being able to use, especially for raptors who have such specialized feet and beaks, to be able to see those in action. I also really enjoy feeding, I'm gonna see if I can move this a little bit here without the tripod so we can get a little bit closer. See if we can see. I don't want to unplug my phone, but maybe we can try to see it a little bit closer. Sometimes I'll also do things like feeding an owl a mouse so that we can watch them swallow it. So now he's gonna work on the rat itself. Now that he's really ripped up this egg carton, he's gonna start working on the rat. So he's using that curved, sharp beak to really tear it into pieces. See what other questions we have here. I don't really have a good thing to prop this on, so I'm gonna just try to do this. You've seen this exact eagle, that's awesome! Being able to see Gladdy, this particular bald eagle, he has, like I said, been with us here at the Raptor Center for over 20 years, and he's been doing programs for most of that time. So he has been out to many different places, so he's very good at his job. Chunk of rat. We did try to do some fun pictures for this last state fair of rat on a stick. I don't know if they turned out very well. I don't know if other people would find that nearly as exciting as we do here at the Raptor Center. The birds seemed to think it was fun when they were able to pick food off of sticks. Hopefully this is a decent angle. So he's working on ripping that apart. Like I said, that curved, sharp beak. What I think is interesting about beaks that we didn't talk about in the book is that beaks are made out of keratin. Keratin is such an important protein. It is what our fingernails and our hair are made out of. So on birds, they're covered in all sorts of keratin because their feathers are made out of keratin too. So for birds, their beaks and their talons, there's a bony structure underneath that's covered in a layer of keratin. So that way their beaks and their talons can always keep growing, just like your fingernails and your hair do. And so that way he's able to keep his beak and his talons nice and sharp so they can do exactly what he's doing right now, which is ripping things up. So if you want to think about what a bird's kind of talons and beak feel like, kind of feel your own fingernails and toenails. It's kind of what they feel like, that kind of smooth, glossy, hard material, where it can kind of almost flake sometimes if it gets wet. That's the same as their beaks and their talons. Do eagles eat the bones of larger rodents like rats? Yes, absolutely they do. Right now it looks like he's really ripping all of the muscles, all of the kind of meat parts off of this rat, kind of preferring to stay away from the skin and the fur. I'm curious to see if he'll probably still swallow the fur afterwards. But right now he's kind of taking everything. So he's eating the bones and he's eating the meat. He, of course, also is eating all of those delicious, nutritious organs. There's the nice big liver in these rats. If he ate, I think he already ate the head. I think he started with the head, which is pretty normal for these birds. They'll usually start with the head because there's a lot of really good organs with good nutrition in there and a lot of water content. There's a lot of water in brains and eyeballs, and most of the water that these birds get, they're going to get from their food. So that's usually what they're doing, is they're going to eat all of it. Oh, perfect. Thank you for coming a little bit closer. That works out great. Maybe if he stays this close, I'll go back onto the tripod for a kind of higher angle, but I wanted to make sure that we could see pretty well. Got to look around, make sure that no one's coming to steal your rats. You'll notice as, even though, he's in this room, there are no other birds around, there's no other wildlife. Oh, he had not eaten the head yet. There we go, now we're working on the head. So even though there's really nothing else going on in this room, he still wants to keep a really close eye out to make sure that no one's gonna come and steal that food. Oh, that's not quite in there. Sorry, I'm trying to get this back on the tripod. There we go. Sorry again for the shaky camera. Just wanted to make sure we got the right angle. So he's gonna keep on working on ripping up that rat. We'll give him a few more minutes here. I don't want Facebook to cut us off. I'm gonna see if there's any last few questions to talk about while he finishes with his rat. It's pretty early in the day for him to be eating, a little bit before midday, so it's a little bit earlier than he often has been eating. What's that? We're gonna go eat it over there. That's all right. All right, what other, just seeing if you have any last few questions. Oh, somebody had asked about when we were talking about the size of eagles. Sorry, I missed this one earlier. Do the females have less white feathers? That's a great question. So I was talking about the differences in size, and for most raptors, other than the size difference, the males and females really look quite similar. So they have pretty much the same feathers. There's really no visual difference between them. So if you're looking at a bald eagle, the males and females really look the same. It's really only if you can kind of see both of them next to each other that you might be able to tell a difference. It can be a little bit tricky to be able to tell. Here at the Raptor Center, we have the benefit of being able to weigh the birds. So when I was bringing him in, it's just plucking the fur off of this rat right now. But when I was bringing him in earlier, I was able to put him on a scale and see exactly how much he weighs. So I know that he weighs a solid kilogram, or a little bit less than about 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds, less than our female bald eagle. So she weighs 4,600 grams, he weighs 3,500 grams. So it's a pretty big difference, but can be kind of hard to tell if it's just two birds sitting out on a tree out in the wild. It can be pretty tricky. But usually the feathers look about the same. How long does it usually take to eat the rat? So right now he is taking his time. Like I said, he is using his beak. I don't know how well you can see. I'm afraid to try to zoom in. I'm afraid it'll do something weird to the live thing, but I can try it here at the end. But he's literally using his beak to pluck off tiny little pinches of the rat fur, which is usually a sign that, not really that hungry, like interested in eating, but certainly not starving, not especially hungry. Usually if he's really hungry, I have seen him try to swallow whole rats. He's usually not able to quite swallow a whole rat with all the parts. Our female bald eagle is able to swallow a whole rat, whereas he usually needs to kind of rip it up a little bit and then he can swallow it. So if he's really hungry, like say it was really cold last night, or it's late in the day and he hasn't eaten yet, he might be able to eat a whole rat in less than a minute pretty quickly. So he's certainly taking his time on this one, which is great because then it's longer for us to be able to watch. How many rats does he eat in the day? It really kind of depends. So a wild eagle is probably gonna eat more than one of our bald eagles here, just because they're gonna have to do more work to find food. They're gonna be a little bit maybe less sheltered than our birds are in terms of the weather. So even though our birds are living outside, they're living in the same temperatures, the way that their enclosures are constructed is they're a little bit more protected from the wind than maybe a wild bird might be, so they might be able to keep a little bit warmer. Like I said, not doing as much work. Right now especially, our wild bald eagles are doing a lot of work of they've established their territories, they did some nest building or renovations, now they're probably raising chicks or at least finishing hatching eggs. So wild bald eagles right now are looking for a lot of food, and usually that's in the form of fish, but they are also scavengers, so they'll eat a lot of different things. A lot of times we think of them as eating roadkill or gut piles from hunters, things like that. But here in captivity, so places like the Raptor Center, this bird, he'll usually get about most of a whole rat, which I realize for people not familiar with rats, it's kind of a weird metric. He'll eat about between kind of a 1/4 and a 1/2 pound of food on a given day, usually closer to about a 1/4 pound of food. Maybe a 1/3 pound is maybe a good measurement. 1/3 pound of food. For him, it's usually rat or fish. On occasion, he'll get chicken, maybe some other random foods thrown in, but usually his main kind of source of food here at the Raptor Center will be fish or rat. An occasional chicken. Sometimes maybe a little piece of something else that other birds are eating, like quail or mouse, something like that, just for a little bit of variety. Usually fish or chicken. So about, for those of you who like grams, usually about 150 to 200 grams of food. Trying to convert that into pounds on the fly is kind of hard. Does he only eat meat? Yes, like all raptors, he's really only going to eat other animals. So they might get a little bit of vegetable matter from the stomach contents of whatever they're eating. But for the most part, they're really just eating other animals. And like I was saying earlier, they're getting a lot of the water that they need from the animals that they eat too. So for them, it's really important that they eat all the different parts of the animal. We can afford to be a little bit more picky. If we are eating meat, we can choose to be a little bit more picky about what we eat. But for them, that's all the nutrition. So they need to eat the bones and the organs and the eyeballs and all of that. So they need to eat all the different parts of the animals that they eat. Or some questions about what are they feeding their young? So usually right now, a lot of our bald eagles, they're setting up, or they have set up their nests closer to water. So they're really looking for fish as a really big kind of prey item that they'll find and bring back to the nest. But again, bald eagles are scavengers, which means that they'll find things that are already dead. They're very opportunistic. So if there is a sick waterfowl, like a small duck on the side of a pond, they have no problem grabbing that and eating that. If they happen upon any small mammal that they're able to catch, they might grab that too. They're really not very picky. But usually fish is the main source of food for them, and then they can supplement that with other kind of mammal or bird that they might be able to find. Do one or two more questions here. How do they? Ooh, it's a really good question. Do wild raptors have sour crop issues? It's a good question. For those of us who are not familiar, so when he's eating right now, all the food, it's not going directly down to his stomach. It's going to his crop, which is kind of an organ kind of right up here. And the crop, it doesn't actually digest anything in raptors. In some birds it helps, but for raptors it's really just kind of like a storage tank off of their esophagus, or that kind of tube that food goes down. When you eat from your mouth, it goes down to your stomach. His just has like a little pocket. It's like a little rest stop for the food. And so sometimes if food is in that crop and then doesn't get set down to the stomach, the food can start rotting, which usually doesn't happen in a healthy raptor, right? That's normally the food sits in the little storage tank, they go somewhere safe to digest it, and then they send the food down to digest it and work on it there. But sometimes if the food gets stuck, it can start to rot, and so they call that sour crop. And so usually when that happens, it's usually a sign of something else that's wrong. Maybe they ate something that got stuck somehow. Maybe they were injured. For some reason, their body isn't digesting food the way that it's supposed to. So it's usually a sign of something else going on, like something happened where they weren't able to kind of fully process that food like they should have. So usually for a healthy adult bird, that's usually sour crop isn't an issue. I'm sure our vets can, maybe we'll add an extra comment in here with some more details. But usually I think whenever we do see that, it's usually because it's a bird that, they had eaten something and then suffered some sort of injury where they weren't able to process that food, and it either, like I said, got stuck or was kind of held in place. Sorry, he's really working on this rat skin right now. So that is sour crop. I'll see if we can, if there's any other info that we can get from any of our vets, and we'll add that in a comment. That's certainly not my area of expertise. They have a lot of really good information on that. But yeah, really good question about crops. Because yeah, all of his food right now that he's eating is going into his crop. Once he's really feeling comfortable, he'll send that food from his crop down into his stomach. That crop is really important because that way he can gorge himself if he finds like a dead deer. He can eat a ton of food all at once and then slowly digest it over time. And then he can choose a safe place to do that. Because of that, that means that raptors can go kind of long periods of time without food. So a bald eagle might find a dead deer, might gorge themselves on it and eat a ton of food all at once, go sit up in a tree, send the food from their crop down to their stomach, digest, nice and relaxed, kind of sleepy. And then they might not need to eat for another day or two after that, after kind of gorging themselves on that food. And that crop really helps them do that. It kind of helps to store all the food. If you eat, like for us, if we eat a really big meal, we get kind of sleepy afterwards because all of our energy is going to digesting. Same thing happens for these birds. They want to make sure that they are able to fly away and stay on top of their game after they've eaten those big meals. Okay, one last question, and then I think he's almost finished with his rats. Do they eat and regurgitate, or do the young tear apart the meat? A great question. And I will say, I will once more kind of plug the DNR Nest Cam, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources Nest Cam for bald eagles. You can actually watch them do this. So eagles and other raptors, what they typically do is they'll bring back a whole kind of prey item, And then they'll peel off when the babies are really young. They'll peel off the tiny little pieces and hand them over to the baby so that they can start kind of eating those. As the young get older and larger and more capable of ripping up food on their own, then they'll be able to offer them smaller pieces or whole prey items that those babies are able to kind of grab onto and rip apart on their own. So it kind of depends. As those babies grow, they're learning how to do that. So yeah, usually for raptors, they're picking off even just little tiny pieces and handing them over. So again, definitely check out those nest cams. Like I said, the DNR Eagle Nest Cam is fantastic. If you're interested in other raptors, the American Kestrel Partnership has an American Kestrel nest box, and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology has links to a lot of different nest cams. I highly recommend. I think he might be coming over to explore this egg carton a little bit more. So now that he's ripped up the rat. I'll see, I think I will end the live broadcast here, but I'll maybe get a closer up video and see if he wants to keep playing on this and see if we can post it, or a picture or a video of him taking a bath here. I will hold off for just a second. If he goes into the bath, we'll keep going. We have to make sure that we clean up our beak. I have noticed for our bald eagles, they typically will take a bath or at least go drink water after they've eaten their food. For some reason, I don't notice it as much for any of the other birds, but both in the clinic, the eagles who are being really rehabilitated, they have a big water, like kiddie pool that they have, and they'll all try to pile in there at once to get into the water after they've eaten. So for some reason, bald eagles really seem to enjoy cleaning off or taking a bath or drinking some water after they eat, which I think is fantastic. I just want to see if he'll go in there. So I'll end the live broadcast with him drinking some water, but I'm gonna see if I can get a good video of him taking a bath maybe after this, and we'll see if we can post that if he does. So otherwise, I want to thank you all so much for joining me and watching him rip up that rat. And we will see you next week for another edition of Reading with Raptors. I will say, okay, I need to tell you one more thing. The little thing that he's doing where he's rubbing his beak on the side of the water pan, a very important beak-related behavior called feeking, F-E-A-K-I-N-G, feeking. And that is to help kind of wear down that beak so it stays really nice and sharp. So feeking is a really important behavior that birds will do. Obviously, normally out in the wild, they're not doing it on a plastic bath pan. Normally, they're doing it on rocks and branches and things like that, so it helps to wear down that beak length. But here in captivity, they'll do it on all sorts of different surfaces, usually after eating, kind of cleaning off. So it cleans off the beak and also helps sharpen it. So that's what he's doing when you're watching him rub his face on the side of that water pan or on a perch. That's what he's doing. It's helping to wear down that beak and sharpen it up. All right, so I was going to finish the broadcast. We'll finish here, but I will keep the camera rolling and we'll get a good video maybe of him if he does take a bath or if he plays with the egg carton some more. So thank you all so much for joining us. We'll see you next week for more Reading with Raptors. Until then, continue everyone staying safe and healthy out there, enjoying that weather outside, and also happy Earth Day tomorrow. Everyone enjoy, hopefully get outside, go take a nice walk outside, see those birds migrating, check out those nest cams, see some birds and what they're up to in those nests. So we'll see you all next week. Have a great time.